how do we structure a winning deal that the market's going to want? And based on how good the deal is how much of an assignment fee I can try to get for it. That's creative financing, wholesaling. Being able to structure these deals is really critical. The thing about creative is it's never just one thing. So it's not just the entry fee. It's about 8 or 9 things that you want to see to make a creative finance deal attractive. So for example, your entry fee, your interest rate, your cash flow, your cash on cash return, and a couple other things. So I think about it like a scoring system, right? So for example, let's say that you've got a 10% entry fee. Well, that's like a huge score on the entry fee category. Whereas let's say it's at 30%. Well, that's going to hurt you because it's over 25. And the reason why there's these rules, the rules are basically, what would an investor have to do if they didn't buy creative and they went and they did traditional financing? Well, to get a DSCR loan, you have to put 25 to 30% down. So you're competing with creative, you're competing with traditional or conventional. And conventional is going to want 25 to 30% down. Okay, so anything better than 25 is going to be better than a conventional loan. What about interest rates? Well, we know right now that interest rates are 8, 9% if you go DSCR. So what does that mean? That means anything under that is going to be better than if they went conventional. Now you want to beat that one by a while. 5, 6% would be high. Anything in the 3s, 4s, anything in the 2s is phenomenal. So you're going to get a really good score on your interest rate the lower it is. This is Lane's deal. So I plugged in all his numbers. Lane and I were texting about this yesterday. So first thing I like to do is I like to figure out the income. 2,100 is the rent. So if you follow me here, my mouse here, you got 2,100. I like to bring this in at about 30% of operating expenses. So a management fee, throw some maintenance in there, some insurance, some taxes, that kind of covers the main things. So that means that his 2,100 a month, after you take out about 30% roughly in operating expenses, puts him at about 1,490 in net operating income. Now that's before debt service. So now he's bringing in 1,490, but then when he adds in his PI, which is principal interest of 1,225, that's going to give him a net cash flow of 265. So that means after paying all his expenses, after paying his loan that he takes over, this thing kicks out 265 a month in cash flow, which is very typical. This is a typical deal that you'll see. These numbers around 250, 300 or so is pretty normal. Now, if this was 500, 700, 800, obviously he would score a lot higher. He could ask for a lot more in an assignment fee. So the goal here is, how do we structure a winning deal that the market's going to want? And based on how good the deal is how much of an assignment fee I can try to get for it. Does that make sense? That's creative financing, wholesaling. So now let's go over to his structure. Well, he's got a sub 2 loan of 286. He's going to take over. I threw in a couple grand here in closing fees. I like to factor this in, Lane, because I would definitely use a transaction coordinator, and subject to, there's some hair on it, right? You got to do some stuff.
2 small things changed a little bit. The sub 2 loan balance is 284, and I'm ended up giving him 10,500.
Okay, good. Let me update it then. 284 cash to sellers. This category 10,500. Awesome. So follow me on the math here, guys. This is just basically his structure. So 284. There's no second position. There's no reinstatement or legal fees. That would be if it's behind on payments. There's no agent, so there's no commission. He'll have a couple grand in closing fees. We have right now, we can change this, but a $15,000 assignment, a $10,500 cash to the seller at closing. That means his total acquisition is $313,500. Where do we get $313,500? Well, you're taking over 284, and then you got these 3 expenses that you're paying in cash at closing. So these get added on to your loan balance, right? To get your total at 313. And that puts your entry fee at 29.5. Now 29.5, that's only 9% total entry fee. That's phenomenal. An investor is going to love this. Then we put the loan in here. So he's got a 3.125 rate. I'm assuming it's a 30-year fixed. I guessed it's probably like 27, 28 years left. I'm guessing they put that loan in place a couple years ago. Lane, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. They bought it in 2021.
Okay. That payment now this is not counting taxes and insurance because that's already factored in like over here. But just the principal and interest is about 1216. There's no other loans here. These other ones are if there's a second position or, you borrowed the entry fee or whatever. So that's all blank. So then if we go back to the cash flow analysis box right here, that means the net operating income carries down. That's 1490. Again, that's total rent of 2100 less 30% in expenses gets us to 1490. Then we have to subtract our debt service, gets us to 273 in net income. And then let's look at a couple more things. That means for the investor that buys this property at 313, he's basically buying at a 5.7 cap rate. And if you could sell this property at, let's say, a 5 cap, now this is using commercial terms now, but this is just something to kind of think about. An investor interested in a 5 cap would be willing to pay 357. Just kind of shows us that we're in line with this being a deal. Okay, cash on cash is 11%. That means this 29,500 that the investor is going to put into the deal, making 273 a month or 3281 a year, is getting him an 11% return on his cash investment, which is great. I always try to be in double digits. If I can be in double digits on my cash on cash, that's good. And then I always like to show this depreciation write-off number. So what you do is you take the land value. I just guessed it at being 40,000, 50,000 in the land value. Then the balance of that, assuming that you're in like a higher tax bracket, the investor would be saving about $9,900 in write-off. He'd be creating a $10,000 a year write-off by owning this asset. Now, this is a big deal for some buyers. That's why I like it in here, so I can kind of talk about it if it's the right buyer. If you're selling it to an investor, like we have a buyer right now that I use with Chris Allen in Florida, and this buyer's aggressively buying, and all they care about is the tax benefit. They don't even care about anything else. In fact, they'll buy stuff that doesn't cash flow as long as it's got a good tax benefit. So what are you looking at here? You're looking at, okay, we got a double-digit cash on cash. We got almost $300 a month in net cash flow. We got an amazing rate at 3.1. Do you have a balloon on your sub 2 loan?
No.
That's huge. So balloon guys, typically you'll see sellers will put a balloon on these where they say, okay, I'll let you take over my payment, but I want paid off in full in 3 years, whatever the balance is, or 5 years. As long as you get that thing at 4 or 5 years, you're pretty good. But since this doesn't have a balloon, that means the buyer you wholesale this to, Lane, they could stay in this loan for 27 more years and never pay it off. That's very attractive. So see what I mean? How we're looking at like all these different things to figure out like what makes this a good deal. And you might push this. You might push this 15. The only reason why I bumped it down to 15, the only downside to this deal, I wish the 273 was a little better. Like if that was 500 or 600, you could probably get 20, 25 on an assignment. You still might get 20. The reason why I think you might get 15, you'll get 15 to 20 is because you got a dang good interest rate. There's no balloon. Your entry fee is really low. Those 3 things are your best things about this deal. Super low entry fee, 3.1 fixed rate, no balloon on that is going to be, those 3 things are going to be super attractive. 273, it's okay. It's not bad. It's not terrible. It's not the best, but it's good enough. Like that's good enough for an investor to want this.
You may be able to push that 2,100. I mean, it's a 3,000 square foot house.
So here's what I would do. Yeah, go on Rent-A-Meter or whatever. Find 3 or 4 comps that are showing rent. And if you can show to an investor with comps that it's at like 20, like watch this. If I put it at 2,500, let's put it at 2,500 for fun. Now I got to drop this down a little bit because I want to bring this in at about 70. So let's make this 250. That gets me, let's call this 150. I'm almost there, 175. I'm just adjusting the number so that this comes in around 70, 71, something like that. Okay, now you're at 558. At 558, with all the other cool stuff going on, you could probably get 2025 in an assignment on this. And Lane, promise me you're not going to keep this.
No, I'm building my cash machine, bro. Come on.
Okay. I thought so. I just had to say it.
All wholesale.
Because watch this. I'm going to now move your assignment to, let's just see what happens at 25. I mean, that only brought your entry fee up to 12%. Like for an investor to get into that house, I mean, that house is clean. Like, guys, let me show it to you. You guys see this? I mean, that's a nice house.
It does have solar panels, and the solar panels are paid off as well.
Yeah, this is a sharp house.
Why are they selling it?
They need to move back home. They got to get back down to
Oh.
Mississippi. I mean, my cash offer would be in the low 200s, not
Yeah.
even close to what their payoff is.
Yeah, the reason why is because they try to sell it by the time they pay closing fees and so on. They're going to be right where they're at anyway. They're probably going to walk away with 10 grand or not even. Being able to structure these deals is really critical.
You know, his biggest concern is just getting enough cash to move back down to Mississippi. Really, that was his biggest concern. Just getting the money he needs, getting back down to Mississippi. He was totally open with the subject to concept, letting me take the loan.